Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Rochelle, if you could do roll call.
Sure. Director Tresson,
Here.
Director Lewis,
Here.
and Director Cox is on the line. Director Smelser
Here.
and President Wilkins.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rochelle.
You're welcome.
Let's now go to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Amen.
Hi, Dale. Are
I'm
you
with you.
okay? Can you hear?
I'm with you.
Okay. Can you guys hear him?
I heard him.
Okay. I put the speaker right up to the phone, so hopefully that works.
Great. Morning, Dale.
Good morning. Can
All
you
right.
hear me? We can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
right.
I can hear everybody.
Great.
Excellent. Okay, next on our agenda is the AB 361 action, where we as a board need to consider finding under Government Code 54953 that as a result of the COVID-19 emergency, number one, that meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees, and number two, because of that, the meeting can be held by teleconference. Would anyone like to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion. Oh, go ahead.
All right.
I'll
moved
second.
And seconded by Blake. Any discussion on this item? Any public comment on this item? Michelle, were you seeing any public comment?
I have no one with their hands raised for public comment.
Okay. Those in favor? Actually, I guess we need to do roll call. So,
We do. Yes. Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
yes.
A motion is passed with a 5-0 vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rochelle. All right, next on our agenda is public comment. So this is an opportunity for any person to make a comment to the board on any items not on the agenda for up to 5 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment? Rochelle?
I have no one with their hands raised for public comment.
Okay. Thank you. If there's no public comment, next on our agenda is professional achievements, awards, and anniversaries. I believe Vicky's going to take on this.
Good morning, President Wilkins and directors. As I do every month, just wanted to acknowledge staff for their professional achievements, awards, and anniversaries. And this month specifically, we just have 2 anniversaries, which are pretty significant. And I wish we were in person so that we could honor these 2 employees in person. But those employees are Celeste Graves and Mark Messerschmidt, Celeste being from the admin department and Mark being from the maintenance department, and both with 15-year anniversaries. So congratulations to both of them. Yes, thank you. That's quite an achievement, and we appreciate their hard work. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to those 2 individuals for their time and dedication to TTSA. Okay, there's no further comments on that item. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. We've got 2 items under consent. Is there anyone who would like to pull any items from consent?
Director Wilkins, the Finance Committee has gone over the general fund warrants and the financial statement, and I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thanks, Lane.
Second.
Seconded by Dale Cox. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
No public comment.
No public comment. Thank you. All right, so we've got a motion by Elaine, a second by Dale to approve the consent calendar. Those, if you could do roll call, Rochelle?
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes.
The motion is passed with a 5-0 vote. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rochelle. And next on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting from October 20 of 2021. Anyone have any comments on the minutes, or would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion for approval.
Moved by Director Lewis. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Director Smeltzer. Any public comment on the minutes?
No public comment.
No public comment. All right. Seeing none, Rochelle, if you could do roll call.
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the updated maintenance mechanic 1, 2, and 3, and purchasing agent 1, 2 classification descriptions.
Would you mind handling that one, Vicki, please?
Certainly. Good morning again, President Wilkins and directors. As a continuous effort to maintain the accuracy of the classification descriptions, there are proposed amendments to the job descriptions for maintenance mechanic and purchasing agent. Many of TTSA's job descriptions reference requirements that must be obtained from California Water Environmental Association, also known as CWEA. These certifications are not required to work in the wastewater treatment industry, but we have chosen to require them as a measure of aptitude. As it relates to the maintenance mechanic job description, there is a requirement for the mechanical technologist certification. And recently, CWEA changed their eligibility requirements for testing for the MECTech series. For example, obtaining a grade 3 certification in the MECTech series now requires that an individual must have a grade 2 certification plus 4 years experience in the wastewater industry just in order to test. A grade 2 requires 2 years of experience in order to test. CWEA will review previous non-wastewater experience, but will only allow a very minimal amount of that previous experience to count toward years experience in order for the individual to qualify to test. TTSA, like many other employers, I'm sure, is currently experiencing a job market in which it is difficult to obtain a strong pool of qualified candidates. This CWEA amendment drastically changes those recruiting options for the agency. With the current maintenance mechanic job description, an individual with 20 years experience could not meet the minimum requirements of obtaining that CWEA certification within the required time period written into the current job description due to those new CWEA requirements for testing. So the agency would have to potentially forego hiring a qualified individual that did not already possess a CWEA certification. Therefore, the agency has amended the job description requirements for obtaining the CWEA certification. And there will likely be more of these job descriptions coming forth in future months due to the same reason. We have many of our job descriptions that require CWEA certifications. And as these changes come up or as we get to those job descriptions, we'll also be amending those. In addition, we have the purchasing agent job description up for review today. Historically and currently, the admin department requires a hybrid purchasing agent that also performs front desk functions, since there's not a significant workload for two separate positions. Some of those duties that are currently written into the purchasing agent job description have previously been incorporated into the executive assistant board clerk position also, so we're removing some of those. Upon acceptance of the changes of the purchasing agent position, we will begin recruiting for the purchasing agent. So management and staff recommend approval of the updated maintenance mechanic and purchasing agent classification descriptions.
Thank you, Vicki. Any questions for Vicki from any of the board members? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item, Rochelle?
No public comment.
Okay, there's no public comment and we don't have any follow-up questions from board members. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion for
To recommend
maintenance mechanic 1 and 2.
the updated maintenance 1, 2, and 3, and the purchasing agent 1 and 2 classification descriptions as presented.
Excellent. So we had a motion from Director Lewis and the best second I have ever heard from Director Cox.
So noted. Okay,
Any further discussion by board members? All right, hearing none. Roll call, please, Rochelle.
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes.
The motion is passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Vicki. Next is approval to award the bid for the 2021 chlorine scrubber improvement project.
Jay, would you mind handling this one, please?
Yep, no problem. Good morning, directors. Before you today is the chlorine scrubber improvements project bid. If you recall, this went out to bid a couple months ago, last couple board meetings. And we received one bid for the project, received on October 28 from KG Walters out of Santa Rosa, California, for $1.1 million. The bid was found to be responsive and responsible. The total bid price of $1.1 million is greater than both the budgeted amount of $1 million engineer's estimate of $978,000, greater than both of those. However, it is still considered within the realm of reason. So our management and staff recommendation is for approval of the award to KG Walters for an amount up to $1,210,000, which would include the 10% contingency on top of the $1.1 million bid.
Great, thank you, Jay. I see a question from Director Lewis.
Yes, I don't know if I put it to Jay or Richard, but you know, I remember in '97 when we approved that and built that scrubber. Is that the normal natural life of a scrubber unit? And if so, which components fell apart to where we're only getting 22, 23 years of useful life out of it?
So I know we're accustomed to equipment lasting a lot longer here at TTSA. We have a lot of aging equipment that's been in service for 40 plus years, but a 20-year life is considered standard of the industry for mechanical equipment. So given that we're 24 years now, almost nearing 25 years, it's not unexpected that it needs to be replaced. I would say it's
Is it the corrosion and the electrical components of the scrubber?
So one of the items that occurred is that we have it's a tank within a tank, so to speak, and the primary tank leaked into the secondary tank. We've since had that repaired, but there's, evidence that that's either, it's seeping again. So, we need to, it's time to, to replace that. Michael or Richard, do you want to elaborate on any other problems that you've had recently?
Sure, I'll jump in. Yeah, that's really the only issue that we've experienced with it. As Jay described, it's a dual tank. And working with the vendor when we had it repaired, it's not uncommon, and they've changed the design because of this. But when you do have a failure of the liner that protects the fiberglass from the corrosives, and that material gets in between the two, then you just start chasing your tail because you just can't get to it to fix that part of it that it's degraded. So the design has been improved over the years to eliminate that issue. But as Jay said, the lifespan, we've gotten good life out of it for the application.
Okay, so basically on this new scrubber unit, we have an updated fiberglass unit that will, maybe have a little bit more extension in life. Who knows? But I'm waiting for that Carrillo report, especially because looking at the capital that needs to go out and what's going to be done in the future. Blake and I were discussing in the finance committee the costs associated with updating the plant in the future and how we're going to financially accomplish the replacement of equipment that we need to do in a respective manner as the units reach their useful life. And it's important for us to know that so we can make those judgments properly. And we don't get hit all at once with some major capital costs down the road at one time. So anyway, that's good. I just need to know the explanation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Blake?
Jay, I'm just curious, the staff report has very specific dates associated with the work, July 18th through August 26th. What's the magic about being so detailed about start and end date?
So the part of the magic there is that we need to shrink the time window that the contractor is permitted to do this work. So we minimize the disruptions to the plant. And then we also, want to avoid the 4th of July weekend, be after that. And then we also want to be during the summer months during favorable weather. So that's how we landed on this window of dates.
And is there some type of, trying to remember the term, penalties for the contractor to, not perform by these dates? The contractor's held to this timeline?
Correct. Yeah, we have liquidated damages within our contract for any delay beyond the dates presented in the contract.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Any other questions from directors? Seeing none, is there any public comment, Rochelle?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no more questions and we have no public comment, would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to award the 2021 chlorine scrubber improvement project as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Director Lewis, second by Director Schmelzer. If there's no further comments, Rochelle, if you could do roll call.
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes. Okay,
Motion
next on our,
approved, 5-0. Sorry about that.
thank you, Rochelle. Next on our agenda is approval of resolution 19-2021, authorizing the general manager to approve certain construction contract change orders.
Thank you. At our last board meeting, there was discussion about the general manager's authority as it applies to construction contract change orders. So there was some direction to amend the current resolution and updated. To be specific, there was an increase of a contingency. Well, there's an increase to include in a contingency amount, which we just did for the award of the previous project. And also to increase the change order cumulative amount from $25,000 to $50,000. So all the other provisions in the resolution remain the same, with the exception for those two. The resolution was brought to the Finance Committee. We had a discussion about that. They reviewed it. We had a brief discussion about it, and they recommended it be approved as well. So on that note, management staff recommend that resolution 19-2021 authorizing the general manager to approve certain construction change orders be approved.
Thank you, LaRue. Any questions or comments from board members?
Reiterate that we did discuss this again in the Finance Committee meeting, and we discussed this, I believe, at the last board meeting, and I think the resolution provides a good balance for staff to keep projects moving and with board oversight. And again, on the previous item, the addition of that $100,000 contingency provides you guys, I think, with a good balance for a project. Yeah, I think this is a good move on our part. And I forget, do we have the motion yet? I will, if not, I'll move to adopt the resolution 19-2021 as written.
I'll second.
Thank you. We've got a motion from Director Trezin and a second from Director Lewis. Rochelle, is there any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
All right. Seeing no public comment, Rochelle, if you could do roll call.
Director Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion approved, 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Next on our agenda is discussion of in-person Board of Directors meeting. So I believe this would be related to our December meeting and whether we want to plan on doing that in person or do it remotely.
Correct. That's a good summary, President Wilkins.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? We chose to do this meeting remotely for a couple of different reasons. From my perspective, I'm comfortable doing these meetings remotely or in person. I always like to see people. So probably my general preference is to do them in person, but remote seems to work just fine and in some ways can be more efficient for people. So I think I'm good either way.
As am I, with Dale and Lane. If it works better for you guys to do it remote, I'm fine with that. If you're in town, you're in town and we're all here, I prefer to have a public one, but or in person, but I'm amenable to going virtual.
I will be back in town for the December meeting, so that's not an issue. So
As will I. I'll be back for the December meeting.
So if I could be so bold as to suggest we do our December meeting in person. Would other board members be comfortable with that?
I'm okay either way.
Okay.
all good.
Do you need formal action on this, LaRue?
Yes, sir.
And
Okay.
Dan, I would just add to that, similar to last time, we had intended to have, I think, this meeting in person as well, but that we remain flexible, depending on people's schedules and, more importantly, because that's really the intent of the law to have virtual meetings is, if there's changes in case rates, hospitalizations, so on, that we, that LaRue, and you work together as we get closer to the publication of the next packet and, if it's appropriate, make that decision at that game time, kind of a game time decision there.
Okay. LaRue, question, or maybe it's for Rochelle. I assume the decision on in-person versus remote needs to be finalized prior to the publication of an agenda. So it's really that Friday prior to our meeting date when the final decision needs to be made. If we were going to make a change for some reason.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Don, and we
Let
put
me-
it on the agenda. I'm sorry.
okay.
Well, if the finance, our finance committee can recommend that, can they not, prior to that meets in between the full board meeting? Can we recommend that in case we don't have we're missing a couple directors? Within that 30-day, that gets us within the 30-day period is what I'm saying. Can that be
You're-
done by committee?
You're asking if the finance committee can make the determination if the next board meeting should be held in person or not?
Right, because that gets you within the 30 days if we're having an issue.
Yeah, the 30 days, I don't see that as an obstacle because we can reauthorize AB 361, the findings of it, or renew it. So I think we can overcome that. As it pertains to the scope of authority for the finance committee, I didn't really view that as part of an authority for them. This agenda item here was to have that discussion now and then make that determination. So
Okay.
it would need to be determined before the release of the board packet, Dan.
Okay. And so the reason I ask, it sounds like all the board members are comfortable with meeting in person, and that'll be the plan for the next meeting. I was just thinking of the reason for something to change. This time around it was related to concerns over a quorum of the board. So I think that would be a reason to change. I guess I'd have a question of the other board members if someone's availability were to change, 2 weeks from now, let's say I have something come up where I would be able to participate remotely, but not in person. From the other board members' perspective, whether it's me or any one of you, would you see that as a reason? So if just one board member is unable to participate in person but can participate remotely, would you see that as an appropriate reason to go ahead and just switch the whole meeting to a remote meeting? Or is it better to just conduct the meeting with one fewer board member? LaRue?
If I may, you're referring to not being present, because you can still attend in-person meetings through audio teleconference. You're
Right.
referring to the video conference, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm just kind of throwing a question out to get the flavor from the other board members and get a sense as to what your preference is.
Dan, I would say that it would depend on one, whether it's you as the board president, and two, the items that are possibly up for taking action on and the importance of having a full board. And so again, I think it's a case by case situation. Again,
Okay.
My understanding is that AB 361, which gives us the ability to have a virtual meeting, we have to be a little careful. It really needs to be because of public health issues. That's going to be the stated reason for it. And so I think we need to play it on a case by case basis, depending upon, that, but and I would leave that up to sort of you and LaRue to discuss as we get closer. And if you need to solicit other board members' input, do it there. I don't know that there's a simple answer to that question that applies to everything. And again, 361, which gives us the ability to have like this virtual meeting, can be adopted at the beginning of a board meeting that, gives that exact board meeting the right to be virtual. And it also lasts for 30 days. So we're today's the 17th and the next one is on the 15th of December. So in effect, we wouldn't have to adopt 361 again for the December board meeting to have it virtual. But if we wanted to do it in January, we would either have to adopt it in December if December's is less than 30 days away from the January, or the first thing on the January agenda. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
Good.
Okay, thanks for your comment. Yeah, what was on my mind is if someone on the board or a key staff member were, one of us were displaying signs of COVID or to be diagnosed with COVID, so
Right.
then not appropriate for us to come in person. But it would seem that that would be a reason to make a game time call to go to a remote meeting if we have critical items on the agenda, so that that director could still attend as long as they're physically up to it.
That works for me. I mean, I had COVID back in June and I was able to do the board meeting with you guys all remotely. So it works.
Right, right. LaRue?
What I can do, Dan, is like what Blake suggested, I'll reach out to you a week or two before the board meeting. We can discuss the numbers for COVID and get up to the board of directors and then make a conclusion at that time. It's going to deviate from the decision today.
Okay. All right. All things being equal, though, we'll plan on being in person for our December meeting. Great. All right. Thank you. Next on our agenda is management team
Dan?
report. Yes.
We have a public comment on this.
Oh.
one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, if we could take public comment.
We have Jane Davis for public comment. Go ahead, Jane.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would strongly urge you to continue with teleconference meetings while we are in the midst of a deadly pandemic. Not all members of the public may be willing to risk their health to attend your meeting. For the board to insist that members of the public attend in person while they are able to phone in from the safety of their private spaces is really reprehensible. I realize that you would probably prefer not to have to deal with public commentary, but you have chosen to be on the board as representatives of the public. Listening to the public, even when it's uncomfortable, is the job that you've accepted, or it should be. If public comments are so deeply uncomfortable that you can't cope with them, perhaps you should resign in favor of a member who would take that responsibility more seriously. As Harry Truman famously said, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Rochelle, is there any additional public comment?
No, Director Wilkins, there is no other public comment.
Okay, thank you. We will reclose the item for public comment. I believe the preference of the board prior to that public comment was to continue with in-person meetings. I don't believe any of the board's interest in in-person versus teleconference meetings is related to either encouraging or discouraging public comment. I believe it's related to kind of what we believe are the best kind of format for our board meetings and interaction of the board and the public. So, from my perspective, I think trying to get back to in-person meetings as consistently as possible continues to be appropriate given the stage of the pandemic. With that said, I'll reopen it to comments from other board members and see if anyone else has a different opinion on planning on the December meeting being in person. All right, seeing none, we'll just go ahead and plan on continuing to have the December meeting in person, and we'll continue to evaluate. Thanks, everyone. Next on the agenda is department reports.
Before we proceed, I just wanted the board to be aware of the fact that we have chosen a new option to present this. What you have in your packet is the written department reports, but we also now have a presentation that we'll be providing as the managers proceed to update the board. So with that, I'll share my screen. And as the managers go through their portion, I'll go shuffle through the slides. And managers, if I'm missing anything, just let me know to proceed, okay? Change the next slide. With that, I'll go ahead and I'll share. Everybody see that okay?
We see the,
Administrative department report. Can we go to operations?
Okay. All right, good. Proceed, Michael. Thank you, guys.
we're on the administrative report, department
Oh,
report, not
you
the
are?
main, yeah. We're not on the main slideshow, we're on
Okay.
the presentation.
There you go.
Is that better? Okay.
Good morning, Board of Directors, President Wilkins. Nice to see you all today. For the operations report, department report, all the plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. Operations summary, bar screens, wash press, number 1, startup was performed at the new Headworks building. We continue to add caustic to the effluent to maintain a neutral pH. Operations work orders, 3 completed and 4 pending for the month. Laboratory summary, we have completed the third-party laboratory assessment. Staff continue to train remaining operators and weekend testing. And laboratory corrective actions pending, we have 8, and 0 were completed for the month. Next slide, please.
You guys see that as I transitioned over? Did not go?
It
No,
didn't-
it's not showing the slideshow, it's
Okay.
only showing.
There we go.
Yeah.
Is that better? I'll just use this format. Sorry, guys.
That's good. I just wanted to point out for the month of October that we did have a high flow event due to the bomb cyclone that hit the region. The new terminology, I like it. Average daily flow was 4.8 for that period. And we had a max day of 6.9, which you can see is out of average for us or out of the normal range during that period of time. Usually we don't have that type of precipitation. I just want to bring it to your attention. Other than that, is there any questions for the operations department?
Hey,
Yes,
Mike.
I got a question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, Dale.
I understand that the flow meter at the exit point of Squaw Valley was out of service. Can you tell me, Michael, how long it was out of service and what was the reason behind the anomaly?
Yes, just a high over. I might have Richard chime in a little bit too, because so as an I&E department IT fix, we had a failure at the Olympic Valley's flow meter telemetry site as we had some componentry fail, and we had a electrical disruption that had to be fixed. I believe the duration of lost data was about 2.5 to 3 days.
Okay, with that disruption, was that caused, Michael or Richard, from the excess rain that could have affected the components? And has that been repaired so that we don't have that happen again?
Yeah, it was not. We do not believe that it was caused by the excess rain or moisture. There was no evidence of that. It was just componentry that is built into that telemetry system that sends the signal out. I don't know, Richard, do you want to go further into what componentry it was that failed?
Sure. As Michael mentioned, there's no signs of water intrusion. All appearances, we just lost a power supply. And when the power supply burned up, it took a few other components with it. So it took us about a day to reestablish power to Olympic Valley's meter, and then another day or so for us to complete repairs on our panel.
Now, was that electrical failure due to a power surge or some kind of a brownout that was beyond our control?
That would be really hard to tell, just because we don't have any sense of whether there was any brownouts that occurred in the area. It looks like the power, this happens on occasion with the power supplies, is they'll die. And then sometimes when they die, they just die internally, and other times they overheat and actually burn up. And that was the case on this one. It burned up, and some of the heat generated damaged some of the other components. But all appearances, it was just a failure of a component.
Okay, and final question, Richard. Is there any kind of surge protection that we have in place before the power goes into our apparatus?
Yeah, all the stations have battery backup or UPS, uninterrupted power supply, and those function as a surge protector to stabilize the power coming out, going to those supplies.
So basically, it was just a component failure that could happen to any of the other station readouts within our region.
I didn't hear all of the last part of the comment, Director Cox, but I did. It does appear just to be a component failure. We do use those at some of the other locations, and all of them have been inspected. And there's no signs of any of them showing any abnormal output or any other concerns with them at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Dale. Dave?
Yeah, this is for Michael. In the fund warrants, I was looking at the turbine oil prices, and that struck me as a lot. What do we use the turbine oil in? What machinery?
I believe that'd probably be more appropriate for Richard on that one for maintenance, but I believe it's used in our blowers that we use for BNR for aeration, for nitrification.
So that is required, yeah, okay.
Yes, it is.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. All right, is there?
Lane has his hand up.
Oh, Lane, okay.
Yeah, Michael, okay, when you saw that atmospheric river coming at us, and I guess you get that 6.9 MGD that day, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you did not, the plant was able to function properly. You didn't have to use the ERB, did you?
We did bypass some flow to the ERB during the higher, yes, we did bypass some flow. I don't know what the total bypass for the day was. I could find out and get back to you.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just want to know, I mean, when you're looking at the weather situation, we have an event like we did. I mean, once every, when we got, I know we got 6 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, and to see the plant, how it functioned, is extremely positive as far as I'm concerned as a director, seeing that the plant functioned properly. What steps do you do to take prior to, when you see an event like that coming, what were some of the things you changed as far as the operation to make that event less of an event?
Not knowing what the full impact of the rain or would be at the plant, basically, we just put parameters out for the operators to follow for when they would start to bypass, and then we're constantly monitoring the plant to make sure that none of the processes are struggling, and in order to determine if we need to bypass more or less. And a peak flow for us for the day of 6.9, although it was out of the norm for that time of the year, isn't a substantial flow that we can't handle.
Okay.
And you also have to realize that there was a lot of dilution, so that it wasn't as much of a loading situation as it was just a flow situation.
I'm looking at operation wise too. I mean, were you able to, looking at an event like that and you know your people are coming, a lot of them are coming from Reno. Were you in contact with them as far as making sure everybody could show up for work, or were you on a situation, say we had an emergency situation, would you require the overtime if other people could not make it to the plant?
Oh, yes, we have on-call staff. We have management that could come in if called in an emergency. Myself, I was available for the time period. I would have come into work if need be. We always have that in our back pocket.
Okay, thank you. You know, I had another question. I had somebody brought up the issue of, you know, do we have surface water running? Have we ever had surface water running to the Truckee River? And correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know who to point can answer this as far as Jay's probably been here the longest, but LaRue or Michael, you know, the only time that I've ever, you know, in my 30 years on the board, the only time I ever seen surface water was from the standpoint when Tykert violated their mining permit and they dug down and groundwater surfaced in there, and well, you know, which they did not go by they dug too deep. They had surface water coming up. It was in a basin, and then the basin went away. And I believe that was in 2007, and that was even before we owned the Tykert property. And they since, you know, once they dug too deep, they went in and reclaimed it. We've never had a situation for that. And since we stopped, I think we spray irrigated up to 1999 or maybe even to 2000, but we don't spray irrigate. We have not spray irrigated since that period of time because of when we were doing the plant expansion, everything going through the BNR, and the Pyramid Indians wanted a full accountability of that water being purged through the SAT system and not spray irrigated, so they get full credit for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, to my knowledge, that is a pretty good summary. If I recall, I think we spray irrigated. We did some testing for about 10 years from 89 to 99, like you had mentioned. And we had stopped that because of the losses through evaporation when you spray irrigate. Again, our SR, you know, our fields, our disposal fields are buried about 4 to 6 feet deep, and it's approximately 15.5 miles of perforated pipe that our effluent goes into that then is allowed to percolate through the ground. It's about, I believe, about 22 to 23 acres of land that we use for that disposal. And you're correct. If I remember right, in 2007, there was some daylighting of water inside the Tykert pit, never left Tykert's pit. And then when that happened, they basically filled the pit in with or the area that they over excavated, they put soil back into that area so the water would not daylight any further. And as far as I know, that's the only incidence of water daylighting from our groundwater or disposal water system.
Okay, Jay, do you have a comment on that since you've been here the longest? I mean, that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, on the Tykert issue, they had over excavated. Their agreements with Lawton and such are that they wouldn't mine below the groundwater table or to the groundwater table. They did, and we noticed, and then they immediately took action to backfill that area so that they were not getting into the groundwater table. So yeah, that part's that's accurate.
Okay, and no water flowed out from that groundwater.
No, it was in like
A pit.
it was in the lowest part of a depression in the pit. It didn't run off anywhere. No.
Okay, Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Lane,
Could I ask another question, please?
yeah, go ahead, Dale.
Michael and Richard, we've all been watching the news about the heavy weather events that are taking place in northern Washington. And we had that bomb cyclone come through, which delivered a significant amount of water. But the question is, if we have a significant rain event like we're seeing happening up in northern Washington, and the herb gets full, have we been testing, and do we have any kind of a maintenance or testing program in place to reactivate those ponds that are behind TSD and over there by 267?
So I'll answer that. Those are lined ponds, most of them, and any bypassing that we had to do, that we had to, anything over what we could handle through the plant. And I guess I'd refer back to the winter of 2016-17, when we were putting up to almost 20 million gallons a day for a couple of days through the wastewater treatment plant. That was a very high flow event that we handled very well. We have trigger points on the herb to where we don't typically fill it up all the way, so that we can keep room in it for any kind of process failures. And then the backup to that, of course, is Pond A and Pond B are the main ponds we'd go to first. And we have a total of about 23 million gallons of emergency storage capacity throughout the ponds to handle these high flow events. Of course, every high flow event is different. You can't really have a formula for one.
Correct?
I'm sorry, what was that, Dale?
Are you talking about the pond next to the plant that we call the herb?
Yes.
Okay,
That is
what
also
about
lined.
those storage ponds that are down there by the 267 bypass behind TSD?
I'm also referring to those. That's Pond A and Pond B.
And those constitute the 23 million gallons?
In conjunction with other ponds that are not lined, it does.
Okay, so one final question, Mike. Are we testing and making sure that any of the pumps or valves that we have that operate those ponds in case of emergency, are they regularly exercised and tested?
We do have ways to pump out of those ponds back into our system if we need to bypass to them, yes.
Okay, and once again, those bypasses, pumps and valves are regularly tested?
For instance, well, we don't have a pump that actually pumps out of a designated pump that pumps out of Pond A, but we have portable pumps that we can pump out, and those are tested and maintained by maintenance. And the sump pump that is in Pond B, we have to use that on an annual basis just to get rainwater out of that pond. So it is tested in a way, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Dale. Any other board questions on the operations department report?
I got one.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and this is, Michael, it's probably, if Jason's there, maybe he can answer it as far as the ELAP findings when we use that company, the list of findings is what, and it had, different findings on each different reference method. Do you find any of those findings difficult to accomplish in the last report we got, Jason?
Rochelle, can you let Jason in, please, so he can
Yes.
speak to that?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. And here he comes. Go ahead, Jason.
There we go. Good morning, board. Yeah, so the report we got from IAS is pretty typical in my experience. I've already kind of resolved all of those. I'm just kind of in the process of formally documenting the response. I'll probably be turning that in this Friday. It's actually due next week sometime. I'll get it in a little bit early, but no, none of those were earth-shattering findings in my experience. I've seen assessments with more, I've seen assessments with less. And then none of them were really substantive. Of course, I don't want to diminish, any finding is a finding. But they weren't substantive, and I did get a lot of communication from the assessor that he had no concerns with the data quality, and he was very happy with our operation, and he was very happy with the staff. And the staff have been working really hard over the last month or so since we got that report. We've made modifications to SOPs, we've made modifications to QA manual, we've made modifications to bench records. And really, I think the overarching theme of the findings was essentially just traceability. So effectively, yeah, we know we did it, but do we have a really good evidence trail that we did? So these findings are kind of really serving the purpose of helping us shore up a little bit of the documentation, kind of put us in a better spot. And that really, it was the focus, both on my part and on the assessor's part, is just really, staying positive, continual improvement. I will say that in the future, I think I would like to see the number of findings drop progressively as we get in the habit of doing these third-party assessments. They are a little bit different than what we were accustomed to with the state assessors. This is actually quite a little bit more formal, and it's actually appreciated that it's a little more formal process. But yeah, we've already resolved any of the issues that were brought up, and I'll be formalizing that in our response. And like I said, I'll be sending that out probably Friday, and then I'll get a response from them whether they'd like a little more or whether they're satisfied with my response. And then we should be pretty much good to go. But yeah, nothing major. And again, I just want to thank the staff preparing for this. Even in the period of time before I got here, a lot of the staff had been working on a lot of things, correcting a lot of things, putting the lab in a good position. So kudos to the staff. And yeah, so if you guys have any more questions.
I just look forward to seeing how, when you make that response, and at the next board meeting, give us a little update, see what they have to say. Looks like we're moving in the right direction as far as the ELAP and TIN requirements, and just keep moving forward. And thank you for your hard work.
Of course.
Great. Any other questions or comments on the operations department? Blake.
Dan, I did. One quick one. Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate the explanation there. On this slide that we're looking at now, those 8 pending laboratory corrective actions, those are the ones associated with that report. Okay, fantastic. LaRue, if you could switch to the flow chart. That was, bomb, cyclone, atmospheric river, whatever you want to call it. That was a significant storm. We looked at our weather stations, and it was anywhere from a 10-year to a 100-year event. And for us to kind of business as usual, not have any spills or, emergency responses is actually not something to take for granted. The state does require reporting of spills. There's a clearinghouse. I've gone to that website in that October 24th event. Last I looked, there was over 40 spills throughout the state with almost 10 million gallons of escaped sewage into the environment. And so almost all those from systems that were overrun. And so I think that, you know, the TTSA staff, as well as the staff of all the member agencies that have the collection systems that feed it, deserve, you know, a lot of credit for having a magnitude event like that occur, and for the flows to not even reach what we saw on a dry weather July 4th event. That's really commendable and important to recognize how tight our system was. You know, we had the advantage that that event was pretty much, the rain fell on very dry soil. If an event like that happened in February, when you had snow on the ground that could melt and the ground was frozen and it wasn't running into the soil, you know, we could see a much different response in the collection system. And so continued vigilance on all of our parts is important. I know that we get that the agency has effluent criteria in terms of what the plant has to put out, but do we not also have the plant rated for certain flow also, that, you know, there's I don't know whether it's a monthly average flow that it can't exceed, or a daily average flow it can't exceed, or an instantaneous average it can't exceed. But, you know, it'd be interesting to know what those are, and, you know, and have an event like this and hopefully see how well we are. So I don't know, Mike, if you know what those flow.
Yes, the criteria for TTSA is from June 21st through September 21st of any year. The flow of wastewater treatment disposal facility during the 7-day consecutive shall not exceed an arithmetic average of 9.6 MGD. And the maximum instantaneous flow rate of wastewater through the treatment facility shall not exceed 15.4 MGD.
Okay. And it looks like, you know, this doesn't show the 7-day average. It was a 1-day spike, but, you know, somewhere between 6.9 and 4.8. So well below that 9 MGD. And then the instantaneous, it looks like in your report, showed us hitting 7.3. So way below, less than 50% of the permit allowance. So that's, again, you know, we've got some safety factors there, which is great. So this is good. You know, I am looking at the values you have here of a max day on that October 24th event of 6.9, and looking at the axis, and maybe you guys need to just look at your chart there. It doesn't look like it's falling at 6.9. So take a look at that, make sure we get that corrected. But again, there are a lot of agencies that had massive spills, you know, thousands and millions of gallons. And so again, not only to TTSA, but all the member agencies deserve a lot of credit for weathering this event.
Thanks, Blake. Lane.
Yeah, I mean, this is that, as far as I think, that was the largest rain event since we expanded the plant. I believe the retention basins were last used in '97, I believe, when we had a January storm that was very warm. And it's like you say, Blake, we had amount of water running in. Then we used the TSD ponds, well, our ponds now, but you know, to take the excess amount of effluent in there till the plant had time to recover and run through it. But you know, when we did the plant expansion to 9.6, I believe it was, I think prior to 2000, I mean, the plant was rated at 6, I think, something like that. But I look at those flow charts, you know, on the 5-year averages, and I'm looking at it from 2016 to 2021. And it looks like, actually, I mean, maybe our systems are getting a little tighter. I know we've been in a drought period, but the flows certainly aren't going up. And we've had almost an 8% increase in the last 10 years as far as total EDU connections for the agency. So, I mean, member districts, TTSA, I think we're doing a very good job as far as, you know, I always look at those, sort of extrapolate those numbers to be looking at plan expansion, because when we were looking at plan expansion in the mid 90s or so, our flows were going up at a pretty good pace. And then it took us 4 or 5 years to get the permits for the plan expansion. And by that time, in that 2 to 3 year construction period, all of it was done. But it's showing that as far as capacity wise, anyway, you know, we were looking at a 2028 another plan expansion after we did the first one. And I don't think we're going to be even. It'll be interesting what Carrillo comes back with, but I don't think we're anywhere close to that because our flows aren't increasing that much. Even when we had last year with the COVID, we had a lot more full-time people here. The graphs don't dictate that much of an increase in flow. So, I mean, when Blake and I were discussing this in the finance committee, looking at the long-term effects, how we financially plan for, you know, the infrastructure improvements, TTSA, and you know, it'll be interesting to see what Carrillo reports back as far as the next plan expansion. But I don't think, you know, when we did the first one and we're looking at the increase in flows and stuff like that, they were calling for a 2026, 2027, 2028 plan expansion. We're nowhere near that close because of our flows. So we're doing a good job.
Thanks, Lane. Any other board member questions or comments on the operations department report? Okay, seeing none, for public comment, we'll take public comment after we've gotten through all of the department reports, and we'll open up public comment at that time on any item on the department reports. So I believe next is the maintenance department report.
Yeah, morning, President Wilkins, Board of Directors. So you can see we got the bullet points of the work orders that were completed and pending. I just want to point out on fleet, you'll notice that the number's pretty low at 3. And that's primarily because this time of year, those 3 work orders represent getting all the equipment ready for winter. So chaining up the loader, skid steer, tire changes, et cetera. So they're time consuming work orders. Drop down to the backlog. As you see, mechanicals trended up at to 156. We're working on getting that number down. We've had 1 staff member out for an extended period of time, as well as the 1 vacancy, and then having a few other staff members out intermittently for various issues. So that's trended up. So we're focused on getting that down and anticipate being able to start chipping away at that one. Additionally, for fleet, that 52 represents a bit of going live with Lucity. So a lot of those are PMs, and as we input the PMs, they're now coming out all at once. So we'll be making some adjustments to spread those out over the year, as well as utilize a seasonal time period to do ones that are good for winter versus summer. Other than that, in the next slide, we have some photos of Dean Haynes, one of our grade 3 electrical instrumentation technicians, and then Justin Parrish, one of our mechanical 3 technicians, working on an actuator for the 2 water pond. The next photo is actually Dean out commissioning it in and getting it ready to go. Next, we have clarifiers. So as you know, engineering will be touching on their portion of this as far as the coding projects. This is our role in it, where we go back in and reinstall grading, handrail, electrical, water, draft tubes, all of those little pieces that come off to facilitate the coding project. In the next photo, we have Ryan Schultz, one of our grade 3 E&I technicians, changing out a level indicator for the 2 water hydrodynamic system that provides 2 water throughout the plant. That unit failed, so we installed a new one. And then we also did load bank testing of both of our emergency generators, working with our local Caterpillar dealer. So they brought in that large device that's in the back of their truck there as a load bank. So we actually load them up and push them to their limit. Gives us an opportunity to see what the degradation of the windings are in the generator, as well as checking out the engine and pushing it and getting rid of any wet stacking issues. As you can imagine, when things are engineered, they tend to over-engineer. So the motors under a normal load are not running at 100%. So that can lead to wet stacking. So this gives us an opportunity to burn that out and bring them up and see if there's any issues in anticipation for upcoming winter season. So that wraps up what I got, and look forward to any questions you guys have.
Thanks, Richard. Any board questions on the maintenance department report? All right, seeing none, I believe next is engineering department.
Yep. Good morning, everybody, again. So yeah, for the engineering department report, the first project I'd like to discuss is just piggybacking on Richard's report on the paint project. I reported last month that our contractor had completed the paint work for the secondary aquifer number 2 and stripper basin 58 project, and maintenance is rebuilding those as discussed. So projects under construction, we currently have one. It's a big one. It is wrapping up, but it's a 2020 Headworks Improvements project. So we got a couple photos here. The big milestone this last month was the installation of the second screen, which you can see on the left-hand photo is the unit on the right. And then after it's complete, a photo on the right from the backside, it's the leftermost unit there. So both units are now operational. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is a shot looking kind of from the downstream end up, and what you're seeing there is the hopper with a roll of plastic. You could just think of just kind of this continuous infinity tube of plastic that actually is not infinity, it does run out. And then we need to, put on a replacement. But basically the screenings do fall into that bag, and it makes the installation cleaner and less odorous. Next slide, please. So we did have some failures when the unit was first put into operation. The first failure that occurred, which was on the right, actually, if you look at the right photo there were some things where we were thinking, okay, the welds at the factory were not done correctly. So the contractor made some welding modifications. And then subsequently after that, on the photo on the left, the shaft actually sheared. And so everybody, us, the contractor, contractor was talking with the factory to figure out why this failure was occurring. They did some sleuth work, and they figured out that the box in which this auger fits in had a factory defect. It was not square and plumb. There was an angle in the sidewall that allowed this auger to be spinning at an angle that was not flat, but at an incline. So not directly parallel with where the forces were. So to make a long story short, the factory is replacing the entire washer press unit with a new unit that has that's been fabricated per the correct tolerances. So next slide, please. So this is a video showing the flow path. One of the features that we added on this job is to allow us to take flow which would normally have come to this existing box here and then go through to the headworks. And we installed a pipe on the right-hand side that we're going to pan over to here that connects to the box beyond. And that allows us to take all of our influent flow, our recycle flows, our Glenshire flows over to this existing box here, and then bring that over to the headworks through a parallel line. So what this does is it affords operations a lot more flexibility in terms of how they manage flows into the plant before it even gets to the headworks. So that was the first piece that the contractor did in early summer. And then later summer and early this fall, next slide, please, they worked to install the headworks. So this is a video of the screens and installed. The screenings drop down into the sluice channel in which water is flowing and conveys any screenings that are picked up over to the washer press boxes, which are there in the background. Next slide, please. So from the other angle, again, that's the sluice channel that screenings go down, and then this is one of the we're going to look inside a washer press where the screenings fall down into a spinning auger, and then that auger compacts those screenings and up into the tube that I was describing earlier. Next slide, please. So this is a close-up video of the screenings going into that auger, and then subsequently down to the tube where the screenings are collected. Next slide, please. And so projects under construction, another one that we don't have photos for yet. The digital scanning job, the field work was completed. We're waiting on the digital deliverables. Projects in bid phase, the scrubber project, which we discussed in an earlier agenda item. Next slide, please. And then we have several projects in development. Master sewer plan, which is being done by Carollo, is in a final review and revisions phase. Digester improvement study, which is also by a consultant, is being done. That's currently in a study phase. And then we have 7 or 8 projects here that are being done internally, all of which are in final design phase, save one. That's the control room upgrades project, the next year's digital scanning project, the final effluent flow meter project, filter influent condition assessment project, plant coating improvements project, roof repair project, and then we're in pre-design on a sewer manhole adjustment project. And I think that takes me, that's the last slide I had here.
Thanks, Jay. Any questions from board members on the engineering department report?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Lane.
Well, Jay, when can we expect Carrillo's final sewer master plan report? Are we going to get something next month? Or are we going to get something in January? How close are we?
So we have this final revision comments that are going to be sent back. My thinking is that this is going to end up needing to be on the January. I would expect that they would wrap this report up, sometime in mid-December, but I don't think they'll make the December board meeting.
I'd almost, I'm thinking once that report comes to us, maybe we ought to have just a board meeting reviewing once we get that report, because there's so much there. Hopefully, there's so much in there as far as a lot of new information that we have to digest and do that, because that's a huge report.
Yeah, it's over 800 pages. LaRue, do you have any comments on?
Sure.
I think we should wait and see what our board agendas are looking like. I appreciate the comment, Lane, that if we've got a heavy board agenda in January or February when the Carollo report would be coming forward, we might want to consider a special meeting. If, on the other hand, we end up with a light board agenda on other matters, we might be able to just incorporate this in a regular board meeting.
Good. Just want to make everybody aware of it.
Yep. Yeah, good comments, Wayne. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members on the engineering department report? All right, seeing none, I believe next is.
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just real quickly, this is Blake. Jay, thank you for the videos. That really helps kind of show what's going on. Quite a bit better than just still photos, and certainly better than just description. I'm curious, the quantity of material that we receive at the plant that ends up in that kind of pink tube in the hopper. Do we fill up a whole hopper every day? Is that a couple hoppers a day? I just trying to get an order of magnitude of, you know, what the treatment plant sees and is treating with those bar screens and
Yeah, I'll have Michael respond to that, but before I hand it over to him, I'll just mention that, you know, as part of the design process, we did track, you know, how much screenings, you know, we were accepting, you know, with our prior screens. And what we're seeing is that we're getting a much more compacted solids out of these, which translates to lower volume. But, you know, for the exact numbers, Michael, can you chime in?
Yeah, just for comparison, with our old screening system and our washer compactors, we were on a normal day dumping the bin once a day as it would fill up. And now with the greater compaction and cleaning capabilities of the new wash press, it's about every 4 to 5 days that we have to actually dump that bin into the disposal system to take it off to Lockwood.
wow, so we're going to get some savings in hauling costs and tipping fees and less operator time just managing that material. It's the same amount of material, just denser because of the cleaning and compaction.
And we're anticipating it's actually more material since these bar screens have a tighter tolerance. It's actually probably more material than we removed before, but it is because of the way it's compacted now. It definitely will save us in the long run.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks for the question, Blake. Any other questions or comments from board members on the engineering department report? All right, seeing none, I believe next is the administrative department report.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I just wanted to cover a few high points real quick, our biggest items that we're working on in the finance department. The first one being we're still continuing our work for the financials and the audit with the auditors, working back and forth with them. And that's going very smoothly. The second large thing, actually probably the biggest new thing, is we had our first financial committee meeting. It went very well. We discussed expectations of what we would like, what the board would like to see, or the two participating board members would like to see each month. We also talked about future items, you know, potentially investing items and using the finance committee meeting for budgeting, and obviously anything that is deemed necessary from the finance committee and or the board of directors. The next big thing is that my entire team participated in the annual GFOA gap update. It's a 4-hour training of upcoming GASBs, current GASBs and GASBs that are in a few years down the pipeline. It's always a good idea and a good training for us to be seeing what we have coming at us for anything that we have to implement. We have a few things that will impact us in FY22. And so we will be working closely with the auditors to ensure that those go well and according to the requirements. LaRue, can you go to the next slide? So in our billing and customer service department, we have, I gotta see that a little bit bigger. Can that be bigger? There we go. I can see now. So we're continuing to perform inspections, and we performed a commercial inspection of the new Arts Center at Kings Beach in conjunction with North Tahoe Public Utility District. In October, we had 29 residential permit fees issued for connection fees, 1 residential addition, and then 2 commercial permits. And then in October, we had a significant amount of sewer service connections, or I guess implementations that were activated. 1 with TCPUD, and then Tahoe or TSD had 110, which 77 of these were the artist lofts as part of the rail yard project. None of the other member districts had any activations this month. Additionally, we finalized the Ames hosting project, working with the Ames team to update the parcels database and the parcels map layer. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please, LaRue. So on the left, you'll see the new art center in Kings Beach. And then on the right is a snapshot of the Truckee artist lofts. And that is it. I would like to definitely thank my accounting supervisor for really stepping up. Her timelines are crunched significantly for the finance to have the financials and the warrants ready for the finance committee meeting. And her name is Michelle Mackey.
Great, thanks, Crystal. Any questions or comments from board members on the admin department report? I think you're muted, Blake.
Sorry, I keep muting myself and forgetting. You'd think you'd figure this all out. LaRue, can you go back 2 slides? Just clarifying, I like this report, and just these 2 bullets, one on new connection fees and one on new service charge additions. This is just a timing issue. So the new connection fee permits are when people come in and we basically charge them the connection fee, and we're now reserving capacity for them. And then at some subsequent date, they've completed their project, they're actually flowing, and we're now charging them monthly user fees. And that's what that second one is. I'm just making sure that I'm interpreting that correctly and the rest of the board understands. Is that right, Crystal?
Yeah, yes, because the connection fee permits, they could take, I don't know how long California has, but up to 36 months to complete their project potentially. So there is definitely a timing issue, and it'll vary significantly.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Thanks, Blake. Questions or comments from other board members? Okay, if there are none, I'd like to take this opportunity to open up the department reports for any public comment that we may have. Any public comment, Rochelle?
Yes, we have Jane Davis for public comment. Jane, you can go ahead.
Yes, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I came here this morning to express how appalled I was to recently find out that TTSA submitted fake data to the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board. We've been over the dubious ethics involved in TTSA taking an extra reading last May and averaging that reading with an earlier one that showed a coliform bacteria violation in the final effluent. But Mr. Peak implied that the high coliform bacteria readings were short-lived and resolved within a few minutes, and the data he submitted to Lahontan showed a sample with 170 MPN at 8:30 a.m. and a second sample of 0 MPN, also taken at 8:30 a.m. But it's just come to light that the laboratory notes reflect that the second sample wasn't taken at 8:30. It was taken at 10:50 a.m., 2 hours and 20 minutes after the first sample. So I have two questions for this board. Do you think Lahontan would have been so accommodating in allowing the highly irregular averaging to avoid a violation if TTSA had provided them with accurate data that reflected the true times of the sampling? And do you, as board members, condone TTSA falsifying data to a state regulatory agency? Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Jane. Any other public comment, Rochelle?
No other public comment, Director.
Okay. So in relation to the kind of topics that Jane Davis raised, is there any additional information staff would like to provide the board? And if so, great. If not, that's okay.
Michael Peak, would you provide some clarification on that, the reporting times? I don't think the assessment that the conclusion that was reported is accurate. So would you mind elaborating on that, Michael, please?
Yes, and as we have discussed before, this question has come up, that we did our original grab sample in the morning, saw that we had a low chlorine residual, and we proceeded to do a second grab sample later in the day. So that's why we had the two samples. And it's my understanding, and Jason, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the 8:30 time frame was done because of our reporting system through GeoTracker didn't allow us to do both those times, or it was a click and drag situation where it showed up both at 8:30. Lahontan knew when we reported that these were not both grabbed at 8:30. They understood that one sample was grabbed at 8:39 or whatever the time was, and the other one was grabbed hours later after we had corrected the low chlorine residual and allowed the plant to be back into normal operating situation. And they did allow us to average those two numbers as the number for the day. And they actually encouraged that as part of their criteria. LaRue, is there anything else that you think needs clarification?
No, I think you've hit on it. I think the big point is that this was also discussed at the Lahontan board meeting. And based on their feedback from their staff, the agency's direction and what they did was preferred and accepted. So with that, I think that addresses the point there, President Wilkins.
And I guess the other thing, I'm sorry, I would like to mention one more time, and I have already mentioned this, is that when we took our second grab sample, we did not know what the results of the first grab sample were at that time. So that second sample actually could have been higher or different and still put us into a violation. We didn't know. So this was just the due diligence of the plant and the operators to make sure that we had corrected issues and that the plant was functioning correctly.
Thanks, Michael. And I will note, I did watch the portion of the Lahontan board meeting where this issue was discussed and where the Lahontan staff addressed the board, and where the Lahontan staff was indicating that their opinion was that the protocols that TTSA followed were in fact appropriate, and the protocols that they believed were best practice given the circumstances. So any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, next we'll move on to the general manager's report.
All right, thank you. I'll just touch on the highlights. First, I want to address our increased utilization of software programs. Some of this will be redundant, so I apologize. The AIMS program, which is our GIS program, there was an update done to the parcel information now matches the billing, which corresponds to the data per the county, so that's a positive. Lucity is getting very close to having a full rollout. The asset management program training has commenced. Saraja has prepared a training manual for us to follow. So progress is proceeding well with that one. And then for the Matrix Gemini program, which is the Laboratory Information Management Systems, also referenced as LIMS, has been purchased and awaiting implementation. We do expect in the next month or so to purchase another software program for the wastewater treatment plant, which will be able to help manage that system, the data collection, the flow rates, and what have you. Again, to touch base on the Finance Committee, it was held on on Monday. The meeting on November 8th was held in accordance with AB 361 on Monday. And then future meetings will also be held on Monday, the week before the board meetings. We did find that the Finance Committee to be very beneficial, and we look for good progress with that moving forward. Also, on Cal OSHA, we've had them come by for a site visit on numerous occasions. One of the comments they've made to us is that our front entrance gate needs to be maintained as closed for security reasons. So we will be implementing a process now to allow staff to come in, and vendors and deliveries and what have you, mail. So right now, the plan is to allow entry through an ID badge, which all staff has, either through keypad, inputting the keypad numbers, or on an individual approval basis, meaning they'll have to log in or punch in intercom and find out who it is. So as we progress into more return to inside board meetings, we'll issue badges for you guys, for the board of directors. The recruitment status, we went ahead and re-advertised for the recruitment for the one mechanic position, and the wastewater treatment plant operator 1, 2, OIT through 3 grades. We re-advertised for that, and we're looking for 2 operator positions there. And then for a final update as it pertains to the holiday events, the agency will be holding a Thanksgiving lunch for all of its staff. That'll occur the Monday before, the Monday of the week of Thanksgiving. Our annual employee appreciation dinner is canceled because of the COVID restrictions. However, we will be providing a employee appreciation lunch in lieu of the dinner. And also, since we are not having the dinner, we decided to have 2 food drives, one for Thanksgiving, one for Christmas. And what that is going to do is to entice participation from our staff to donate canned or non-perishable food, which we'll provide to a food bank. And when doing that, they'll receive 2 hours of administrative leave. So 2 for each drive, so a total of 4. So I think that's a win-win for the staff as well as for the community. With that, I have nothing else to add other than some acknowledgements for great work as to the lab dealing with the assessment report. As I understand it, that's one of the better reports that they've received in many years. So that's positive there. They've done a lot of work to get ahead of that and be proactive. And also for the IT staff, they've had to contend with dealing with our consultant coming in, as well as handling the master plan and contending with the implementation of SCADA for the headworks. So they've been under a lot of pressure, a lot of work, and they've been able to meet the deadlines there. So kudos for all their work there. Other than that, I have nothing else to report other than the notes here and the written document. So if there's anything else, I can take questions. President Wilkins.
Thanks, LaRue. Any questions or comments for LaRue on the general manager report from directors? Seeing none, I have one comment. So it sounds like basically the gates at the access point to the plant are now going to be closed all of the time, LaRue. Want to make sure on days when we've got board meetings that we're also making appropriate accommodations so that if members of the public are attending our board meetings, that they're not unduly kind of impaired from being able to get in.
Correct. So we've had that conversation. We are aware that we have to address that for the public. Right now, we're leaving them open while we logistically work through this to make confirmations on the badges and the key codes, key cards, and figure out how we're going to communicate and let the individual access opportunities come in. But we hope to have this implemented within the next week or 2. But yeah, that will also include accommodating the board meetings for you guys as well as the public.
Great. Thank you, LaRue.
Sure.
If there's no other board questions or comments, I would open the general manager's report up to public comment. Do we have any public comment, Rochelle?
Not at this time. There's no one public comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, I believe that brings us near the end of our agenda. The next item on the agenda would be an opportunity for directors' comments. Any comments from any of the directors? I'm not seeing any. Oh, Wayne. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment that, compliment staff, Crystal especially, LaRue. The Finance Committee meeting that we held was very informative. We got a lot of discussion between Blake and I going on, and in a direction. So hopefully we can bring back financial information after having deciphered it, more relevant to the board. So you'd be better able to make a good financial decision. So I want to compliment Blake. He had a bunch of great questions during that period of time. And I think it's a good formation, that committee.
Great. Thanks, Lane. Blake.
Thanks, Dan. Just, these virtual meetings and lack of the holiday event, which I always enjoy celebrating with staff when I've had the opportunity to go to that. Just want to make sure that we express our appreciation to all staff and wish them a happy Thanksgiving and holiday period. So I'll pass that on to everybody.
Thanks, Blake. Yeah, and I would echo Blake's comments. I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving out there, and really want to thank the staff for the continued great work that they're doing at TTSA. I have one item for director's comments, and it's a question for Dick Shanahan, and if it's one that you need to do a little research on and bring back an answer at the next board meeting, that's fine. The question has come up: if we have members of the public who are providing comments under a name that's an alias, is it reasonable or appropriate for us to request that person clarify that that's what they're doing? So the question is not can people use an alias when they're providing public comment? I guess that would be a question. Is that appropriate? And if it is appropriate, then is it reasonable for us as the board to expect that individual would identify that they're using an alias and not their true name? So again, if those questions require some research on your part, that would be fine. I'd just be curious to know what the answer to that is by the end of our next board meeting.
No, I can answer that question for you, Dan. The board may ask an individual to provide his or her name. However, an individual does not need to provide his or her name or his or her real name. If it is asked and you don't get a real name answer, my recommendation is, and the Brown Act requires, that the board simply allows somebody to speak, whether it be anonymously, which is an individual's right, or if an individual even wants to use an alias, you let them use an alias and proceed, and the board listen and consider the comments just like any other public comment. But it's
okay. Similar
to the old Brown Act rule when some agencies wanted to have a sign-up sheet for attendees, and you can't require sign-up sheets either. You can ask people, please sign the sign-up sheet, but if somebody declines, you can't force them to sign the sign-up sheet either. So that's my advice on that issue.
Okay, thanks. Dave, did you have a question?
Yeah, I didn't get clear. Are they required to identify themselves as using an alias?
No.
They're not. Okay.
Okay. So if a person wants to misrepresent their identity or use an alias to represent their identity, they can do that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Thanks for that. I believe that concludes our regular board meeting. And if there's no further comments from board members, we would next adjourn and move on to closed session. All right, thank you very much. For closed session, Rochelle, are we staying on this Zoom meeting, or are we logging off this and logging on to another one?
You would stay here and I will remove all the attendees, and Director Cox just made a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, got a motion to adjourn in a second. Any public comment?
None.
Seeing none, those in favor, aye? Oh, do we need roll call on this?
Yes.
I also have a question for Dick. Do we actually need a motion to adjourn the meeting?
No, you do not.